And we're ready to go. Dr. Lorenzo T. Neal is a native of Monroe, Louisiana, and is the current pastor of the New Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Jackson, Mississippi. In preaching ministry for nearly 30 years, Dr. Neal has overcome many challenges, including a tragic death of his mother in 1980 to gun violence. He accepted his call to preach at the age of 12. Dr. Neal has a BS from the University of Arkansas-Pine Bluff. Go Golden Lions. Is in the music education with a minor in English journalism. And he has quite a resume, which we'll be speaking about more. He's also a radio talk show host on blogtalkradio.com. And he is here to speak with us today on Let's Talk Purpose. Welcome today, Dr. Lorenzo Neal. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm well. I have no complaints.
I am happy that you are here today, and basically we are here to talk purpose, and I could see that you are a man on fire and you're a man on purpose. So today is the 19th of November as we are currently recording this podcast. You and I would know that today is International Men's Day. Being a man of the court, what type of advice or what type of greeting would you like to share to the men that are celebrating this day today?
Well, the first thing I think all men should do is one, be themselves. There's an interesting phenomenon that's happening around America and in the world where men are being emasculated and feminized, and that's affecting the entire spectrum of men, what is masculine and what isn't masculine, and creating a trauma in our connected psyche. And so I'd say, don't be afraid to be a masculine man, manly man, as we celebrate and observe this day.
Good. Men need all the encouragement they could get, especially in a time that we live. They really need the encouragement. And it's good that you just encourage them there. Tell us about what's happening in America right now in terms of the election. Who won? Who won the election? Who is the president? What's going on in the United States? Because as you know, I am from Trinidad and Tobago. It's a little island, a beautiful island in the Caribbean. Have you been to the Caribbean by the way?
Actually, I have a brother-in-law who's from there. So
Great.
Yes. And yes, I have not been able to travel there, but I've heard and seen its beauty.
Yes, it's a beautiful island. And well, you have family already here, so then you have a friend as long as you are here again. So we are here in Trinidad, looking on just like the rest of the world, seeing what's happening in America. Make sense of this whole ordeal.
Well, in essence, we do have a new president-elect in the person of Joseph Biden Jr. and a new vice president-elect in the person of the lovely Kamala Harris. But there is some dispute regarding voting and election. But our Constitution allows for that contested. So it's part of the process. Some persons choose to use it, others choose just to concede. And most times they concede whether they have the chance to win or not. Is just kind of like a ritual of sorts or protocol and kind of like tradition. Our current president, Donald Trump, is choosing to exercise his particular rights within the Constitution to contest the election. And there is, in some cases, evidence of voter malpractice, small cases, possibly voter fraudulence. Um, but most of it is just, he's just contesting because he has the ability to do so and the right to do so. But it's generally seen as a Biden-Harris presidency for 2020 to 24.
How do you envisage the new approach that will be taken by the Biden-Harris ticket?
It's interesting. I'm more independent. I'm in our political system. I'm center right, which means I have some conservative leanings. But what is interesting about the possible future administration is how inclusive they're trying to be. One, with the fact that this is our first female as well as Black female vice president, the highest, second highest office in the country. And so that was intentional to show the idea that they're inclusive and diverse. But at the same time, it's I'm somewhat skeptical of it because not because of the people, but it's the ideologies on both sides in our country. You have the conservative and you have the liberal or progressive, and there's been so much discourse and dissension on both sides that it's unclear on how they would try to bring a sense of unity to the country. They're crediting Black Americans as the impetus for them being elected. They're acknowledging that a lot of Blacks turned out in large numbers to vote, and that pushed them over the edge. But the interesting phenomena is that while a great majority of Black Americans voted for Biden and Harris, there was also a great increase in the number of Black Americans who voted for Trump's reelection, which was an interesting dichotomy. It really, that's going to make this very interesting. How those persons who chose to vote for Trump try to find their place in this new administration, because their voices are trying to be heard. Differences of opinion and all of that they're really trying. So it's going to be interesting. But I support whoever is in office. I pray for them and I pray for the success. I may not agree with policy or things of that nature in some stances, but they're the leader of our country, and Scripture encourages us and exhorts us to do so. Pray for them and obey to a degree, not to do what we can to obey those in leadership over us.
How is church?
Well, for many churches, we're meeting virtually. My church, where I pastor, New Bethel, we have been meeting virtually since March, but it's still thriving. The virtual audience actually is better than the in-person audience. We have more persons watching our streams on YouTube and Facebook than we do when we had actually people in church, in physical worship. But there's some challenges that come with that, of course, not being able to interact with the persons, and being a person of prayer, not being able to physically contact them and pray with them, hold their hands and lay hands and all of that. That's been the challenge, but it's also been rewarding for me to see those of my members engaging in their own self-discipline with their spiritual growth and development, not relying, now that they can't come every Sunday, they're kind of put in a position to spend more time with their own spiritual selves, working out their own salvation. But there are still some churches who are gathering, and in some states where they have not quite banned worship, but restricted it. There are persons and pastors who are practicing their right to civil disobedience and gathering and protest, and trying to say that the church, as well as other entities and such as schools, are just as vital. So if we, they're vital to the economy and the social structure of this country. So it's been an interesting thing.
Are the churches in Mississippi allowed to gather right now?
Yes, we are all allowed to gather because of my congregation's age and some of the physical and health challenges they have. We're choosing not to, as well as my denomination, the African Methodist Episcopal Church. For the most part, we are still playing it safe, and but there are other churches that are allowing. Some are no churches at full capacity, but a lot are still trying to allow people in, practicing social distancing within the worship experience. So, yes.
You have a blog radio talk show. I'm seeing it's
Yeah.
called Zira. Explain to us the name and what this is all about.
So Zira is it's a Hebrew word, and it means seed.
Seed in Hebrew, right?
Yes, but it also I got because of an Ethiopian philosopher who happened to be named Zira, and I had read some of his writings some years ago and was fascinated by his knowledge and his wisdom and his philosophical approach. And so the combination of those two led me to forming Zira. The show is called Zira Today, but I also started a publishing company named Zira Publishing. And because I believe that my purpose, as long as I am breathing, is to sow into someone's life, sow seeds of life, liberation, empowerment. And that's my tag, that's what I believe. And so that's what I do.
I love it. You've been preaching from since age 12.
Yes.
And now you're a full-time pastor.
Yes.
What was one thing you wish you knew before you went into pastoring full-time?
Goodness. How little time I would have. Being full-time pastor requires a lot of attention to things and people that can be stressful, but because it's so many roles. It's not just preaching on Sunday, but it's also being engaged in the community, being engaged with social justice issues, being engaged with the education community and public. It's a lot of things, along with looking after the care and spiritual health and physical health of my members. So, yeah, I wish I had known that a little bit more.
If someone was to ask you today in one sentence, who is Lorenzo Neal? What will your response?
Lorenzo Neal is a human first, a son of God, and uh, and a lover.
Okay. So if you have to now construct a word to describe yourself, what would that word be?
Say it one more time, please.
If we have to construct a word to describe Lorenzo Neal, what word would that be?
Goodness, humble. That's probably the best word I can think of, and I say that with humility.
I received that. I understand that. I understand. I could actually testify to that. You seem like a very genuine, humble person. Um, People have failures in life. What would be one of your biggest failures as a pastor?
Biggest failures? Well, the biggest failure is always a moral failure. Um, and with pastors, it's always, it tends to be in the sexual arena for whatever reason. And I wish I could say that I've maintained sexual purity over the years I've been in ministry, but that would be lying and that's not truth. Uh, but that's been the biggest failure, always the moral failure. You want to live to the call of God and please God. And one scripture that I live by is Psalm 119 and 9 says, how can a young man keep his way clean? By doing things according to God's word. But I found over the years, especially in my younger years, the challenge of trying to find that balance. You know, but I'm so grateful for God's grace.
Yes, yes. What advice would you give to someone wanting to enter into pastoring?
First, seek the Lord. If the Lord is calling you to do so, um, make sure that you fast, make sure that you pray, and do that again, uh, because it's not for the faint of heart. It is not for fame or fortune, although there are some who have accumulated it in that role. But for the most part, it's for a servant. As Jesus said, the greatest among you will be servants. And he demonstrated that to us in the pastoral role on a number of occasions, but more particularly when he unrobed himself and began to wash his disciples' feet. And one of his disciples said, wait, I should be washing your feet. And he said, no, I came to serve and not to be served. And so any person who is aspiring to a pastoral role should have the desire for servanthood, and not just the members of that church, but wherever they serve, that entire community, they are to engage in servanthood.
What are the best resources that helped you along the way?
Aside from prayer and scripture, I always like to draw from the others. I draw from men and women who have been on this journey for a long time, and they have the wisdom that I don't have. They may have the insight regarding situations, circumstances that I can't see, and I draw on them largely because the Lord gives us all wisdom along with the Holy Spirit, and He provides us access to persons who can help us glean from them and from Him. So I try to access as much human resource as I possibly can to better serve this present age.
If you would have to name three people, I know you mentioned there's a few people, but if there's like three people that was most influential to you, Who would those three people be?
Oh boy. My father in ministry, of course. Uh, my father, my birth father, uh, my father in ministry, and wow, this is that's a hard one. So I've had so many great persons who have influenced me and continue to do so. So, uh, but those two persons in particularly directly impacted how I uh, became the man that I am.
Mhm.
Or my grandfather. I should say my grandfather. Yeah. So those three. That was easy.
So it's your father in ministry.
Yes, my
Your
father's in ministry also.
yes. Okay. Good. Um, there's a lot of misconceptions going around concerning pastoring. There's a lot of myths. What is one of the most common myths about your profession and that you would like to debunk?
I think the most common myth is that we don't really do anything.
Hmm.
That uh, that pastors really only just stand behind a podium and speak. I think that's the biggest misconception. Um, Another misconception is that you only need your calling and you don't need anything else. But you need not just your calling, but you need scholastic training. You know, you need to be able to, if you're capable of doing so, get uh, the resources and education that will enhance your calling. You know, I have a lot of degrees in different areas, but all the degrees that I have and all the training that I have only enhance my pastoral ministry. It's kind of like being a jack of all trades, but still a
Mhm.
master of one, and that's preaching and pastoring.
We are speaking today to Dr. Lorenzo Neal. He is a pastor of New Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Jackson, Mississippi. He is also a radio talk show host of Zero Today. You could get more information on Dr. Neal on his website, lorenzotneal.com. If you were in my shoes today and you would like to ask yourself a question, what would that question be?
Hmm. Do I ever get tired of doing what I do? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that would be the question I would ask. Do I ever get tired? And the answer is more tired. I get tired more than I care to admit. And
Okay.
I think that tiredness has been enhanced with this pandemic, uh, with so much going on.
Why so?
Well, um, for me, being a pastor, as I said earlier, is about uh, being engaged with the people and ministering in person, and not being able to do that has been a bit frustrating. And
Okay.
with the virtual service, having to uh, do it, do church in a different format has been challenging. And because my church, like
Mm-hmm.
many other churches, were not prepared as we should have been. We we were in stages of trying to get to a point where we could stream our service, but we had not done so. You know, we test run a couple of times, and so when it actually happened, uh, the challenge fell on me and a couple other persons who had technologically experience, to be able to bring this together and to make sure that we could present a worship experience that was virtual, but also engaging enough for the members to still feel as if they were in worship.
Mm-hmm. Do you enjoy what you do?
Yes, sir, I do. I do. I really do.
Why? Why do you enjoy it?
Well, because I have a very broad ministry. So aside from pastoring, I work with gun violence prevention. I work with criminal justice reform. I work in education with public schools, and I also do pastoral care and counseling. So it's pretty broad, and some of that spreads over into the political arena. So I get to do advocacy and travel to our capital or to the state Mississippi state capital, the U.S. Capitol, and actually speak with legislators about key items and things that may be impactful to the people I serve. Um, I get to be a voice to power, so I get to say stuff that other persons who can't say, may not be able to say because of my role as a pastor. I can say it, and it comes across not just as respectful, but somewhat of authoritative because they know I'm representing a community of people. So I thoroughly enjoy all of that, and to get to see people's lives changed. We do a lot of things. One of the things I really appreciate about ministry I'm able to do here is we serve food. Well, before the pandemic, we served food at our church. Now we partner with a couple other churches and do food ministry. We were ministering to men at the men's shelter, providing food for them. Uh, Partnering with public schools, and had our had people in there, volunteers in there. We were doing a lot. Uh, I was doing a lot, but it is rewarding. I won't say it was. It still is rewarding because I'm still doing all of that. It's just all virtual now.
Hmm. How is it like to actually see a life, an individual, after you have sown, as you say, seeds of empowerment and wisdom and knowledge? How is it like to actually see that individual become liberated, become changed, become a new person, more positive thinking? How is it like?
I think that's the most rewarding experience, and I've been fortunate to have that be a recurring experience in all of my years of ministry. Um, I just got a inbox from someone uh, that that said that it was a message I preached nearly a decade ago, and I didn't
Mm.
recall the message, the sermon, but it was a sermon that I preached nearly a decade ago that they still had access to, and it was a blessing to them. It kind of uh, empowered them to whatever they were experiencing to overcome it and go forward. And I was like, wow, you know, that's the intangible results of what I do week after week. I may not every week somebody may not come up and uh, for a profession of faith, and somebody may not come up for prayer, and somebody may not even act like they responded to the message. But when people come and they say that message was for me, I needed to hear that, or in this case, I heard it again, and it was what I needed for that moment. That's the most rewarding thing anybody could experience, especially me, and I'm so grateful for it.
Uh, you made mention in your biography of a challenging moment that you had concerning the death of your mom. How was that, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah. Uh, so this is one of the things I get to share quite frequently, and it's a story of my mother's death. Uh, my mother, Sharon Neal, was 25 years old when her life was taken in an act of domestic violence that involved a gun. Um, she left behind myself and my three other brothers. Just 25 years old. Now think about that. Uh, Young woman. She had a lot going on for her that was positive, and yet someone decided that they had the right to take her life and leave her children almost orphans. But the great thing about that is her parents, my grandparents, took us in and raised us as their own children. And so we had the great ability to have somewhat of a normal childhood. But the impact, of course, there was some trauma that came along with that. Fortunately for my brothers and I, we didn't experience a lot of the trauma that comes with a tragedy like that. Uh, well, I didn't experience till my adult years. Some children uh, have that happen and they never recover from it. And I've been graced by the God. That trauma I've not been on any drugs other than what's prescribed to me. I've not been on any alcohol other than the wine I drink when I'm cooking a good meal. Um, I've not had any deviant behaviors, and same with my brothers for the most part. But yeah, I dealt with that tragedy because of a loving family that they saw that we needed them in that moment, and they raised us. But it didn't stop there. I also lost my one of my brothers to uh, homicide. He was killed 10 years ago, and in 2016, I had my 18-year-old nephew Kevin Neal Jr. was killed in an act of gun violence. And so I use those tragedies as a means of not just my personal ministry, but as a means of engaging and helping people see the value of life as best I can.
That's powerful. So you use all your life experience and you channel it into workshop trainings, counseling, education, and leadership, um, Bible studies. You host, the Zero Today radio show. You also have a podcast I'm seeing, Be Your Differentiated Self
Yes,
podcast on Spotify. And you're the author of two books. Um, has your life experience so far, would you say is is what you envisioned when you first became a pastor?
absolutely not. Uh, um, I started pastoring uh, unofficially when I was 17, unofficially.
Hmm.
And, and so I was still in high school, and my ambition was to become a medical doctor and all that stuff. I was smart. That didn't happen, of course. But I went on to uh, get involved. I became an educator um, and school administrator before I moved into full-time pastoral ministry. I've been pastoring bivocationally. I was bivocational, where I worked a secular job and pastored uh, part-time. And the experience on both sides, being in full-time ministry versus being part-time bivocational pastor, has enabled me to really understand that God has a plan that sometimes we just don't know. His ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. They are all both higher than us, ours. And what I had planned did not go the way I had planned it at all. But I'm grateful
Hmm.
path that he has allowed me to walk with him.
Your latest book is Reflections from the Pastor's Study. Tell us about that book.
Yeah, so that is a collection of meditations and reflections that I've when we meet in church, in the American church, you have the church bulletin. And one of the things in the church bulletin would be the pastor's remarks. And so that's a combination of all the remarks that I've made over some years. But it's not just remarks. It's devotional as well as reflections, my personal insight in some of them. But I address not just scripture, but I address some issues of the day at whatever time I was writing it. And as well as having it a means for my members to always remember, like, they would you get the church program, you read through it just to make sure everything on Sunday morning was the same, and then you toss it. And sometimes you miss the rich value in those bulletins. And so that's basically what it is. And there's a volume 2 that will be coming out shortly, hopefully coming out shortly.
Okay, good. Sounds great. A Breach in the Family. That's your first book. What's that book about?
Well, that book is based off a sermon that I preached some time ago, and it's based off the story of Tamar and Judah, who basically, if you know the story of Genesis 38, Tamar was married to Judah's sons, and the first son was, according to the scripture, was so wicked that he died, and then she was given to the second son, and the second son decided that he would lay with her, but he never, he would spill his seed. And she decided that she would take matters into her own hand, dressed up as a lady of the night, and seduced her father-in-law. And from there was born 2 sons, twins, Zerah and and it's through the lineage of one of the twins that we get Jesus Christ. And so the book tells that story while bringing in integrating my own personal story about my family's reaction and response after my mother's death, how we managed, or how we interacted or did not interact after that event for the years following, and not only how we interacted, but the eventual rewarding fellowship and life that came from that event. So in the midst of an event that should not have happened, in this case was my mother's death, and in the story of the biblical account, a woman taking her life into her own hands. Both should not have happened the way they happened, but God allowed both to happen and still brought about good.
Dr. Lorenzo Neal, in closing, would you like to share anything with the audience as we depart from this podcast?
Yeah. First, I talk about be your differentiated self. That's by other podcasts, and as a person who walks in liberation and walks in empowerment and tries to have the same, put forth the same to others, I strongly want to encourage your listeners to be self-aware as best as they possibly can. Be emotionally aware, be spiritually aware, and be able to be themselves in that awareness. And not try to be deep or anything. We're all individuals. We have our flaws, and as expressed, even as a pastor, we still have moral feelings that would try to make us feel less than human and less than God's child. But God still loves us in spite of us. And I want to encourage your members, your listeners to always remain faithful to the Lord, faithful to themselves. And as Jesus said, love God with all your heart, heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Where can we get more information on Dr. Lorenzo Neal online?
You can visit my website, lorenzotneal.com. Lorenzo T Neal, LORENZOTNEAL.com, and you'll read about it. Just as my bio is there, but you can also listen to episodes of the Zero Today Show, as well as the Be Your Differentiated Self podcast. You can also purchase my books.
Mm-hmm.
Purchase both of them, or you purchase one of them. Just purchase. Um, and you can find me on Facebook. On Facebook, it's Dr. Lorenzo Neal, and we do a lot of things on there uh, that we don't do on the website, which is sometimes we have videos. I do share our worship service from the church, um, and motivational posts on there. And I'm also on Twitter, Lorenzo T. Neal on Twitter. I'm all over the place.
That's good. In this time, we need men like you to be all over the place, especially what you're doing for God, and easily accessible. As today you shared with us on Let's Talk Purpose, I'm so happy that you took the time to be a part of this podcast. I'm happy that you took the time to share your life stories and encourage the audience about purpose and about what you are doing. And I just want to wish you all the best in everything that you continue to do. I pray that God's hand will continue to be upon you. He will shine upon you, and success in your books and your podcasts and your radio show. And hopefully, the next time I speak to you, I would hear that you have a TV show here on national TV, at least. So it's been a treat. I really enjoyed this interview. I look forward to having you again in the future. So if I don't get to speak to you again, have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Thank you kindly, sir. Likewise to you and your family.
Thank you again. God bless you.